Welcome to Mr. Foy's Easel. Here I am again drawing funny characters. Anyway, they're supposed to be funny because of such things as the exaggerated nose and the goofy grin and the skinny neck. But today I'm going to be dealing not just with funny faces, but what they wear on their heads, or what you might call headgear. For example, this fella here might have a real funny hat, that's all beat up on his head. And this one over here might have a real floppy hat with kind of tattered and torn. So let's go down the list of funny headgear. Sometimes cartoonists will put what we might call old-fashioned or out-of-fashion headgear. Way back in the 1920s, perhaps, a lot of men in the summertime wore a hat like this. It was a straw hat, but it was very stiff and very flat. Of course, you still are looking to your character and his expression and all for humor, but somehow this guy wearing the old-fashioned hat becomes even more comical. I'll give you another example or two. Let's say we have a female character, and unlike modern day ladies, she has on an old topper, well, a topper like maybe back in the 1930s. And if you want to go back even further in time, maybe this is her great-grandma right here. Maybe she rode in a covered wagon out west, talking about a bonnet. You don't see this particular type of headgear around anymore unless it's on stage or somebody doing trick or treat. And then, of course, thinking back to this first guy with the bill cap, sometimes it's not just the cap, but the way you wear it that suggests the type of attitude or personality beneath it. I guess it's about 50-50 now as to who wears it that way and who wears it with the bill in front. Now, speaking of caps, here's one that you see once in a while, maybe often in some places. It's, as a rule, it's not something worn by the younger generation, but by some rather sophisticated-looking gentleman like this. And notice the difference between the two caps. This one is flatter than this one. And as I said, the generational difference is also significant. Well, if you're a cartoonist working on a strip about the frontier, say in the days of, well, let's say Daniel Boone, you might have some of your characters dressed like this. As far as their headgear is concerned, coonskin cap, like Davy Crockett, or as I said, Daniel Boone. And then, of course, hats sometimes are indicative of the type of character you have in your comic strip. Let's say, for example, that you have a character who's supposed to be a spy. And by the way, you know, of course, that a spy would draw more attention to himself dressed like this than otherwise. Well, anyway, here's some of your funny hats and funny faces. And after a short break, we'll come back and do some more. Well, welcome back. Now, one of the type characters that cartoonists are fond of drawing is the cowboy. And you know, in real Western times, I mean the old cowboy and Indian days, they wore big hats, but in a cartoon, remember, cartoonists exaggerate. So a cartoonist cowboy is likely to have a 20-gallon hat, or anyway, a much bigger one than in real life. And so here's an example of a cowboy with a big old cowboy hat. And a bandana around his cowboy neck. Now, certain occupations are identified with different kind of hats or caps, just like the cowboy here. The farmer. Now, as you and I know, farmers are likely to wear no hat or most any kind of hat, but cartoonists, as a rule, want to put a straw hat on Mr. Farmer. And to do a straw hat, of course, he's complete with bib overalls, but straw hat, you do little check marks like that, not necessarily over the whole hat, but that's the traditional straw hat down on the farm. Now, another rural character, but not necessarily a farmer, might be a mountain man. I don't know if any of you remember Snuffy Smith and Little Abner and some of those old cartoon characters, but they lived up in the hills, and, well, I'm not drawing any of those characters, but just one I'm making up. They might have a hat that looks a little bit like it's trying to be a cowboy hat, but, well, not much. And sometimes these guys not only were pictured with the big old floppy hat, but they might have a beard and a corn cob pipe, and might carry a gun around with them much of the time. And of course, this next one applies to anybody that's out on a cold winter's day, a stocking cap or a toboggan cap, I think they might be called. And of course, when you draw in somebody like this, and if they're outside, you might show them with their breath being sort of vaporized, and they might be shaking in the cold, snowy evening. Then, of course, there's just a hat kind of like one that I drew early, but somebody who's down on their luck and they're out on the street, and their hat and the rest of their clothes match. You kind of feel sorry for a person like that, but you see this in cartoons ever so often. Well, we've done enough hats, I think, to get the point across that cartoon humor oftentimes hinges somewhat on headgear. Now let's put a little color on some of these guys, and remember what I have said before. If you've got a flesh color, you can use a kind of an orange or a red color and kind of go lightly with it. Yeah, and let's give this guy a blue hat. And going down the line, we'll give this fella an orange hat and a redder than normal nose. Let's make our lady here a redhead with a checkered topper. And here's our covered wagon lady with a rather colorful bonnet for the trip out west. Okay, looks like a space for another blue cap. Let's see what Davy Crockett is going to look like. He's been out in the sun a lot himself. Sinister spy. I think this type of hat is kin to the fedora that you see in a lot of the old movies. It's got a suggestion of bib overalls on our farmer with his corn-colored straw hat. And well, it's our time is about up. So as you practice your own cartoon character creation, who knows, you could probably come up with even more varieties of headgear for cartoons. That's all the time we have, so remember you can contact Mr. Foy's Easel at conwaycorp.com.
Home security is now available through Conway Corp. It's an advanced solution backed by people you know and trust. Customize your system with motion detectors, sensors, light controls, and more, all managed from your wireless touchscreen or mobile phone. It's an easy way to protect the things that matter and the ones who matter most. It's safety for you, powered by Conway Corp.